Hello, and welcome to the North Texas week version of the Gentry and Seth show.
We are doing one.
Yes.
We are doing one this week.
We didn't do one during the bye week because it was a bye week for us too. We had to.
So for the four of you out there that really enjoy a Seth and Gentry
But
show,
we do
sorry.
promise that we're gonna really try and be insightful and in depth, but not maybe necessarily in terms of breaking down the Mean Green. Their nickname is the Mean Green.
Well, yeah, and
That's what I got.
I'm enough of a contrarian where I could be the one to sit here and say, they're pretty good at. No,
But you're not stupid.
not so much
Yeah.
really. It's going to be one of those games.
Or it should be.
I will say though, that one question: over under on how many North Texas scores, and this will lead into our discussion.
Right, because I think what we were going to talk about is Georgia's defense. Over under.
I say
20.
20.
Yeah,
I think
that's the thing. How much
15
did
to 20.
How much did Florida Atlantic and Buffalo
Buffalo
get
was 23, I think.
Yeah, and that was the opener, and then the Florida Atlantic was the third game, and those
They
were
got-
kind of the signs that the defense last year wasn't going to be up to par, up to
Right.
expectations. So a lot of times you kind of write off games like this, but sometimes they're an indicator of what's going to happen, and that's why I think, and I've been talking to some guys on defense for the story I did in Wednesday's paper, that if they do perform well against North Texas, I'm not sure you can really write it off. It might be a sign that the defense may actually be, the trend line is going
Well, and
in
here's
a good direction.
You look at North Texas's team, and they've done some good things offensively. They got a fifth-year senior quarterback who has a really high completion percentage.
Who has some ability to run, so you stop him.
And that offense will be a decent challenge for Georgia's defense. But when you look at North Texas's defense, that's the mismatch.
But let's talk about the defense, Gentry. The numbers, as if you written
Over
as I've
under
written-
20.
Oh, yeah, I didn't answer that part. Sorry. I'll take the under, but not too far under. 14, 17, 16, something like that.
Yeah, and over under for Georgia's offense probably about 50.
Well, the line's 32, and if we're saying that
50
North
to
Texas
20
is
would
gonna,
seem to be.
yeah, it could be something like that. It kind of depends on how quickly they yank Todd Gurley, Aaron Murray.
And what the game looks like or their turnover.
Right. But in terms of the defense, you're talking about some stats that are ugly on paper. 38 points, then 500 something yards, or I think it was 400 something yards each game. They rank 103rd nationally in run defense, giving up, I think it's 6.2 yards per attempt. But look at who they played. So what's your assessment?
I think it. Yeah, I mean, you look at who they played. I think it was more, not so much. I think Clemson has a legit offense that's going to rank really high in the categories. South Carolina, maybe we don't really know about that yet. But I think if you're Georgia, they had so many inexperienced players that could have used that warm-up game.
Yeah.
They could have used North Texas, which, by the way, was supposed to be their opener when they first signed to play North Texas, and they ended up moving it back for Clemson. Had North Texas been the first game and then you go to Clemson, I think it really would have helped.
I think that'll be in the future, though. They're going to really try and stick to that. They can't do it next year. Clemson's the opener, but they're going to try.
But there was no opportunity to get things ironed out. There were no.
This isn't the NFL. You don't get a preseason game.
No, and you don't get to work in maybe some of the guys that didn't play more just to see what happens. I mean, you had no chance for trial and error. You had to be ready to go from the start. And I think that one thing that I've noticed in watching that defense is there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of athleticism, and I do think they're going to get better.
Right.
It's just a hesitancy. It's not being comfortable.
They're
with
not
the defense
playing at like full speed, which I don't attribute to not having good team speed. It's comfort.
They're thinking too much.
Yeah, and they're when you're not really sure.
Reading, not reacting.
And people may talk about the system. I'm not sure it's a matter of doing the X's and O's as Todd Grantham tells them. I don't think it's the unsure aspect of that. I think it's a lot of times of Todd Grantham actually was talking about the angles, the correct angles to the ball, and it's not so much actually like tackling fundamentals. It's stuff like that. I agree with you, and honestly, I mean, I'm not just saying this to blow smoke up my own butt or yours, but it's kind of playing out the way I thought it would before the season. I said this defense I think will be good by the end of the year, but considering the opposition at the start, it's going to be rough, and it's playing out that way.
There's a couple of things that have kind of, you mentioned the tackling. I think there's a couple of things that will not continue. I think they'll get better at certain things that have been issues. Tackling's one of them. I think pass rush is another.
Yeah, they've gotten close. Jordan Jenkins is going to get sacks.
Yeah, and
playing mobile quarterbacks like that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
They've had 3 sacks that have all been kind of combo sacks. They've all been when the quarterback scrambles and just kind of can't get back to the line of scrimmage.
Well, and to me, Taj Boyd made a lot of plays
Yeah.
when he was flushed from the pocket and he was able to still make something happen. That guy's a good quarterback. I was
Leonard
really impressed with Taj Boyd.
Leonard Floyd's going to make some sacks. Even Josh Harvey-Clemens maybe too.
And Connor Shaw would be back there and 1-2 go. He wanted to run, and he did a lot. And so it's a little different. They're going to play a quarterback that's a little more of a pocket passer this game.
I'm interested to see if we start seeing more out of Trey Matthews. He's a guy, and Josh Harvey-Clemens. I'll throw those two in there together. Those are 2 guys that there's been a lot of hype, and it's not that they've struggled. We know who on defense has actually struggled. It's just those 2 have been kind of quiet. And if those 2 elevate their play to the way they're expected to play, then that elevates the defense.
I think so. And again, just an experience.
Yeah.
Not being sure what you want to do, and it's so different when you're playing a good team.
All right, then let's flip
how
it.
to exploit it.
Let's flip it over to the offense. All right, we know about Todd Gurley, we know about Aaron Murray, we know about the receivers, and the tight ends really can't. They are who they are. Offensive line had a really good game against South Carolina. Made a huge jump week 1 to week 2. How legit do you think that was, that performance?
To me, it looks like these guys need people sitting there talking about how bad they are every
Yeah.
week to really play their best game.
Yeah.
It's happened several times before. I remember Florida last year. Everybody thought it was much the same thing as how in the world is Georgia going to block these guys, and they came out and played great. South Carolina, same thing. And these guys are better when they're challenged. And I think I don't know how healthy Clowney is, and I don't mean to make that excuse for Clowney. But he didn't look the same. He did not look like the same football player that was out there last year in either of South Carolina's.
But it wasn't just Clowney in years past that got to Georgia's line in terms of South Carolina. So and the other thing, Gentry, that O-line had against South Carolina that they didn't have against Clemson was a push for the runs. I mean, Todd Gurley made so many yards against Clemson just by himself, whereas this time, there was a push that you didn't have. It was a better performance, and if Georgia can sustain that on the offensive line this year, their offense is just going to be putting up ungodly numbers.
To me, and Mark Richt has made this point, I've kind of written this too, I think this offensive line is not the kind of bullying, dominant group that can show up every week and do this. Mm-hmm. I think they're pretty quick and they're pretty sound in their blocking assignments. But but it's totally different when they actually show up and play the way they did against South Carolina. It's when they play with an edge and a sense of urgency, and balls out like that. That's the difference.
He told me Mark Richt did one of those UGA Day things back in April or May that he had some offensive lines at Florida State that didn't have like 5 all-stars, but that were good because they were cohesive, and he clearly was signaling that he just wanted that out of this year's O-line. And he may yet.
But if the trade-off to that is if you're not sharp, it can look pretty bad against anybody.
Right.
I think the Kentucky game last year was a game like that. And so I think this is why you've seen the coaches approach it the way they have. So many tactics to kind of motivate guys all through the offseason. And you see the mixing and matching still. I think the lineup this week is going to look different than it was last week, and they're probably going to still keep doing that. So
I don't know if that's a great idea, but
they want to keep these guys motivated, and I think it's because these guys play a lot better when they're ticked off. And
I don't know.
They
were motivating them before the first game. It didn't work, so we'll see. All right, I want to finish up with this. Before the preseason even started, I was saying that I thought Georgia would lose to Clemson but beat South Carolina. I went the complete reverse. In the week leading up to the Clemson game, I changed my pick to Georgia because some people who are completely unnamed were talking me into Georgia was going to win this, and then obviously I was wrong. And then I said I think Georgia's going to lose to South Carolina based on what I saw at Clemson, even though I started to believe again as the week went on. So I'm 0-2. I'm going to make my LSU pick right now, and I'm going to stick to it. Georgia will beat LSU in my mind. And they'll also beat North Texas. And I'm going to stick to that. Gentry, do you have any comment on that?
No, but I'm impressed. I want to see LSU play Auburn. I'm a little interested.
I'm not sure that'll be close. I think Auburn is in for – Auburn and Nick Marshall, God bless them, are in for a hurt. They are going to get physical like they never have. this season. That is.
But if they're not, we're going to learn a lot about LSU.
Yeah, I just think Mettenberger being more of a pocket passer is going to help Georgia's defense. But that's going to be the best defense Georgia's
I'm not really
faced
sure who LSU's played yet. TCU losing after.
Yeah, TCU doesn't look as great as they did before.
And Auburn, I don't think Auburn is an SEC West contender this year, but I think they're a bowl team, and I thought they had an impressive win against Mississippi State.
If the Georgia team that played the way they did against South Carolina, if they show up, they're going to beat LSU too. Not handily, but
LSU's a good team. That's a discussion for next week. Got to leave.
So therefore, we talked more about LSU than we did about North Texas. That's just how it's going to be.
And you can't say you're any different.
And if we're talking about North Texas next week, that's probably not a great thing for Georgia. But see you next week.